Hey, good morning, everyone. We're gonna go ahead and get started.
There has to be some kind of.
Just in the interest of time.
Yeah.
I know there's some construction stuff going on, and of course, sometimes locating the facility is a little bit difficult. But welcome to the Berkeley County EOC for our dam owners as well as Department of Environmental Services. Thank y'all so much for being here. This is kind of a new pilot that we're testing in the county, and we'd love to see this take off in other counties and the region and the state of how do we bring our owners in, whether you're on the virtual side or whether you're in person, to make sure that we're actually communicating good emergency preparedness, good coordination, and that kind of thing. So first and foremost, my name is Will Rochester. I'm the Director of Emergency Management here. Welcome to the EOC. You're more than welcome to donuts, coffee. There's some snacks here, fridge full of drinks. Please make yourself at home. Don't be shy. The goal is for everything to be gone at the end of the day. So donuts, especially, in the coffee. Restrooms, you don't have to go back out to where the DMV is. There are some badges on the little table at the door, and you can actually go right across the hall to the restrooms. You're more than welcome to that. That's kind of our secure area for restrooms versus having to go all the way back out. The doors do lock right behind you, so make sure you have those. That actually gets you in and out of this side of it. If something happens, we have to evacuate the facility. We're gonna go out the door you came in and take a right and go through two doors. We'll be in the back parking lot just to make sure that folks are safe and everybody's together. There is also a sign-in sheet on the table. We want to make sure that everyone signs in just to know that, hey, everybody was here. As we sit through this, and I'll kick it over to DES in a second, please ask questions, please comment. We'll pretty much break this up into two parts. DES is going to talk about their program with good, like really good PowerPoint, really good information in this. What can DES do for you? What kind of things does DES need from you? And then we'll talk through the EMD side, kind of what the emergency management department's doing, what kind of things we're looking at, and we want questions as well. We'll talk about some programmatic changes in the state, like hurricane evacuation zones changed a couple of years ago. I know a lot of folks aren't as aware of that, so we'll talk through that. But otherwise, kick it off to you, sir.
Well, appreciate it. My name is Sam Johnson. I'm here with the South Carolina Department of Environmental Services. Here with a number of other SCDES staff. So, one start off by just doing some basic introductions of who we are, and also to see who we have here today. So, for our DES group, you can introduce yourself first, and then I think we'll go through everyone in the room here, and then go through whoever's on the call.
I'm Katarina Gate. Work closely with Sam and Megan, working through emergency action plans.
Megan O'Leary. I'm also with Pat.
Hey, I'm Danny. I'm the regional inspector for this area.
I'm John McCain. I'm the section manager in Columbia for the dam safety section where we do the permitting and we do the emergency action plans. That's who I am.
And for everyone in the room here, we can start from the left and kind of move across.
Dave Robinson. I'm with Berkeley.
You'll make those two first. April Lips, I'm manager at Crowfield Plantation.
Andy Rickett, the facilities manager.
I'm a Riddick Injury Alumni.
Goldfisher, Moss Grove 2, president.
Will Rochester, Berkeley Emergency Management.
Cole Shirley, Emergency Management. And for anyone who we have on the call.
And we have three on the call, and they should be able to introduce themselves. Maybe.
I don't think they have mic access. I think they can only submit like Q&As.
We may be able to change that. Hold on.
Okay.
And if not, they could just put who they are and who they're with in the chat as well. We appreciate all y'all making out today, taking the time. We love seeing really engaged dam owners, and we want to get information out to you.
We've got Jana Jones from Pimlico Lake Hasty Dam. We have Julia Nobles with Moss Grove 2, and then Alan Albers from Poston Community Management. We actually have two from Community Management. They do have mic access now, so they can actually, they don't have camera access, but mic access, and I can see the chat as well.
Okay. And again, there will be time at the end of this too for plenty of questions, plenty of open discussion. So yeah, good to hear. We can get feedback from them as well. I'll go ahead just for sake of time. Again, thank you for sake of clearing. I'll get a little traffic on the way up here. Get right into it. So, as Will said, we're gonna go over at SCDES sort of what our role is in regulating dams, especially in an emergency, in assisting dam owners and developing emergency action plans, some resources that we have available to members of the public as well as to emergency management, and sort of how that works, how we develop those resources, how we distribute those. And then we're going to hand it over to EMD for the other topics that we'll mention. So getting right into it. What's going on there? The overview of our program, we were established in 1977 through the passage of the South Carolina Dams and Reservoir Safety Act. That's a significant date because the vast majority of our dams were built before that. So when we talk about regulations and standards and requirements, and we're not going to get into very technical details today, but I want to keep in mind that most of the dams that we're regulating were not built to those. They were built well before those standards even existed, those processes even existed. So in many ways, we're trying to catch up in a way for dams to improve how their function. And also at the end of the age, that is going to increase the chance of a dam failure or a potential dam incident. So we're playing catch up in many ways to do that. Used to be, you may have received correspondence from us in the past under the SCDHAC name. As of last July, or it's not 2 Julys ago, we've been reorganized into the South Carolina Department of Environmental Services. There were no substantive changes for our program, whether our central office staff, everyone here but Danny is from the Columbia office, or our regional staff. It was really just a naming and branding change for our program's purposes. We act based on that Dams and Reservoir Safety Act, as well as a specific set of regulations, 72-1 through 72-9, that lay out all of our procedures and all of our requirements, standards, processes. We're going to touch on a few of those today. And we have 16 staff members across South Carolina. So we believe that 9 of those are in our Columbia office. That's a mix of permit reviewers. I think John is our section manager, enforcement staff. And we also have 7 regional offices, 1 position currently vacant, hope to be filled soon in Florence. Danny is the representative for this region. So the Orangeburg region, including Berkeley County. And so these are our regional inspectors, and these are really first lines of contact with dam owners. This is who's out there for our routine inspections if your dam is one that we inspect on a 2 or 3 year cycle, as well as for technical assistance and sort of a non-emergency setting. And we can bring all these numbers and information back out to you later on. And this PowerPoint will be made available today. So we're going to touch on just some key definitions that we look at. We're not going to get too deep into the actual text of everything here, but of course we regulate dams. Well, what does that mean in the state in the legal sense? You can see the definition of the dam there. The key element for us is that last a little bit. These are structures that can cause danger to life or property. So we're a dam safety program, so that's where we're coming at this from. That's why there are a number of dams that exist in the state that we don't regulate because there are other regulatory criteria that would show that structure doesn't pose a safety hazard to a certain degree. Also, especially for counties like this, maybe less so for Columbia or upstate areas, we do typically regulate levees or flood walls or dikes if they meet that criteria. We really don't have many of those structures in our inventory as of now because of some of the criteria we're going to look at in a few slides. But when we're regulating dams, it's not just what you might think of as a traditional dam, a traditional lake. Other things can be brought in. Also noting under that dam definition, it's not just the barrier itself, it's appurtenant works. See what that means right below it. Really for us, that means spillways, outlets, conduits, and that can cause a lot of complexity in terms of who owns a dam, because often a spillway, outlet, or inlet, or just where the property lines are drawn is not going to be on one dam owner's property. It's going to be on multiple dam owners' properties. And we look at the dam as an entire structure. We regulate it as a structure, and from a safety perspective, we have to treat it as an entire structure. So those appurtenant works are just as important as what's going on with the embankment. So is it eroding away? Are there voids in it? What's going on? The height and storage capacity measurements, I'm not going to get too in depth into today, other than just the height of the dam is from the top of the dam to the natural bed of the stream or water course. And the storage capacity is the volume contained at that full height. So there may be, for many dam sports, a normal operating height. But when we regulate and we look at the numbers in a slide or two as to what puts something in our world versus not regulated by SCDS, that's the height and the capacity that matters. And so we're looking at really the bathtub at full capacity, not at what it is on a normal day or even a extreme day through a hurricane. We're looking at truly what is the maximum. In terms of who is a dam owner, there's a lot of ways one could be considered a dam owner, but we are instructed in our regulations to look first at who has title to property on which the dam, including those appurtenances like spillways, is constructed, or entities who have legal responsibility through covenants or other legal agreements. So I know a number of HOAs are involved in the MUNICIG. That is something that we see where sometimes title to property is not always in the name of that HOA, but there's a responsibility and covenants, and that would make them the dam owner over potentially even the property owner. Or perhaps there could be multiple property owners, some by covenant, some by title of property. And I want to note the operator definition here, the operate definition here, that there is no formally defined operator licensing or criteria in the state of South Carolina. So anyone could be a dam operator. That's sort of a functional role. That's if you take certain actions, and you can see some of those listed here: opening, closing gates, removing flashboards. So that could be someone who has years of experience in very technical capacity in operating a dam. Someone could be hired by a dam owner, could be a certain operator, the same way that someone that owns their dam also would be the operator of it. There is no formal training we can provide on that, but we can provide a lot of resources to dam owners as to good maintenance practices. Of course, for dams that we inspect or dams that we regulate particularly, our inspectors like Danny can provide technical assistance as sort of general guidance as to how to keep your dam in good working order, and what efficiencies may be developing with your structure. So in terms of what we regulate, there are estimates of tens of thousands or more dams in the state of South Carolina that exist as dams. Our regulated world is much, much smaller. That's because we only regulate dams if it meets at least one of these three main criteria. So it has to be at least 25 feet or more in height, based on that height definition. Or it could impound 50 acre feet or more of water. So that could be a 1 acre pond that is 50 feet or more deep. That could be a 50 acre pond that is 1 foot deep. Could potentially make it regulated. Or if the failure of that dam would likely result in the loss of human life, regardless of size, that is a high hazard dam. We'll talk about hazard potential in a minute, but that could automatically bring it in short work. And just because your dam meets one of those size criteria doesn't mean it's automatically something we regulate. There are exemptions that can apply. If it's federally owned or regulated, we don't regulate Lake Marion, Lake Moultrie, Lake Murray, any of the large federally licensed projects. We are invited to participate in emergency exercises with them. We're invited to participate in inspections of those dams, but we otherwise have no direct emergency response or regulatory involvement with those sites. There's also, in fact, an exemption in South Carolina, I don't know about unique to the state, but not one we see in many other states, where if the only hazard is a road that's on top of that dam, and that road, SCDOT has accepted maintenance responsibility for it, then that dam can be exempt. So it's not a dam that we regulate, but that's still, from the emergency management side, that's a potential hazard. Like that road, that dam overtops, that road is impacted immediately, but it's one that doesn't come into our world. So in terms of how all this overlaps, just because we regulate something or don't regulate something doesn't mean it's automatically a major hazard or not a hazard at all. There's a lot of layered elements here that can make this very complicated. Same with the lack of downstream hazard. We look at downstream hazard and define that in a very specific way for our program. But just because a dam isn't regulated for us by having a potential downstream hazard that meets regulatory criteria doesn't mean if it fails that there isn't some impact, that there isn't a financial impact to downstream property, that there isn't a potential for secondary impacts to infrastructure of some kind. So something to keep in mind. And then, of course, if it doesn't meet the size criteria, then it would be easy. Once we decide, okay, we're going to regulate this dam, we have to figure out what box to put it in for hazard potential. So we have 3 classifications laid out in our regulations. High hazard focus there is likely causing loss of life. That is impacting homes, industrial commercial facilities, major public utilities, main highways, or railroads. Really, we look at roads and habitable structures. That's where we have the data, and that's where we are able to assess, okay, this is a high hazard versus significant or low. Significant is one that will not likely cause loss of life, but may impact some homes, secondary highways, railroads, interruption of facilities. And then a low hazard is where it may be minimal property damage if it were to fail, not no property damage, not no impacts, but that there's not expected to be loss of life. Now, that's not to say that, we're playing likelihoods here. So if there is someone walking below that dam at the point that it fails, that could lead to loss of life, but it could be a low hazard dam before by the timing. We'll look in a number of slides as to how we assess, okay, is this a high hazard? Is there a likely loss of life or not? So statewide, we've got just under 2,200 dams that we regulate. Just over a quarter of those are high hazard, of course, concentrated more in the upstate and Midlands area, especially in the higher population centers. About 10% are significant hazard, and then we have the majority of our dams are low hazard, especially in the low country. Part of that is just on topography, where the dams are. There's just maybe not, you don't have neighborhoods directly below it. But doesn't mean that there's nothing in Berkeley County. We have 24 state regulated dams. 8 of those are high hazard potential. We have 1 significant hazard dam, and then we do have 15 low hazards. Again, these are just defined by those slides we looked at earlier. There could be other factors involved that could, it could be a low hazard dam that fails, but there could be a key point of infrastructure that would be of interest and of importance to county emergency management, but it wouldn't be something that we could use to justify a classification change.
I have a question, just for the, I think it might be beneficial to the group. Could the hazard of the dam change? So, there's a lot of building going on in the county. There's no doubt about that. Of course, we know that the infrastructure doesn't always keep up, but could the hazard potentially change from your guys' point of view?
Absolutely. Yeah. So Danny is actually, she is who conducts our hazard assessment checks on dams, either ones that we inspect. I should mention it's not in the slides, but a higher significant hazard dams, those are the ones we routinely inspect. High hazard dams, we have staff out there at least once every 2 years. Significant hazard once every 3 years. Low hazards are not regularly inspected, but at 5-year cycles at minimum, their classifications are checked. And with the mapping that I'll get into later on, that is where we found a lot of changes in really just the last decade or so. We had only about a couple hundred statewide high significant hazard dams as of about 2015, 2016. And then with this DSS-wise mapping that we'll look at later on, we've over tripled, really quadrupled what we do in significance that number. And that can be everything from just, it was a known hazard that we didn't have inundation mapping on it. So the impact is not within eyesight, it's further downstream. That could be new development as well. Any number of things could change that. Another element that we regulate and that dam owners are very much involved with is emergency action planning. And really that's why we appreciate being here and we work with the emergency managers for the county on these sorts of topics, because under state law, dam owners of high and significant hazard dams are required to develop and maintain an EAP or emergency action plan. Those plans guide owners through a potential dam failure incident. And there are federal guidelines that we've incorporated to our current template available on FEMA 64, federal guidelines for dam safety, emergency action planning for dams. But that is meant to cover the scale of an emergency action plan for Lake Moultrie or Marion, if that were to fail, all the way down to, say, for us, a significant hazard dam where there's one road impact and we know that road is impacted, but there's no other impacts to it. So there's not a one-size-fits-all approach to emergency action planning. So our goals as a program are to, number one, make sure that owners can meet all regulatory criteria, including a couple of, frankly, very frustrating ones for owners. The regs are predate a lot of the technology that we have now, and some of these, especially the notification elements, are, I think, a little outdated there. So we just want to make sure we can help check that box from a regulatory side. But above all, we want to make sure that the actual plans are as clear, accurate, and as effective as possible to be used in an emergency. So it's not just a check a box of a piece of paper, but then something happens in the dam and the dam owner doesn't know, what am I supposed to do? Who is at risk here? There's a lot of parties involved in an emergency action plan. It's not just a piece of paper that owners provide to us and then we find it. So newly constructed dams have some additional technical requirements. We're not going to get into those today, but they fully developed EAP. But for existing dams, these are the criteria under state regulations. So at minimum, and we encourage dam owners to go above and beyond this, build their plans out, custom to their site, custom to the people that are involved on their end, their experience, their capacity to take on certain roles, make sure the communication is as effective as possible. But above all, at minimum, we need to see it on a format sheet supplied by the department. And we really, we're a little loose with that in a good, I think, a good way. We do have a format sheet. I will be showing you that in a minute. But really, we just want to see a plan that has the core elements of our template document. We're not trying to force a square peg in a round hole just to get a piece of paper filled out. Only other requirement, again, not many requirements, but this is the one that can be a real sticking point, is an EAP must have a written listing of the specific actions to be taken if there's reason to conclude the dam is near failure or has failed. That makes sense, right? That is the plan itself. But that the plan shall include the responsibility of the dam owner to notify any downstream property owners. We acknowledge and respect that, in many cases, dam owners are not the people that need to be issuing evacuation orders, notices, that there are other professionals involved who have better information, better tools to do that. So we try to get a plan together that meets that basic requirement, but also that really in a practical setting would work as an emergency response. So with our standard format sheet, we updated that based on those FEMA guidelines I mentioned earlier in 2017. The biggest change from the prior version of the template was that there's really no inundation mapping or downstream hazard analysis. It was on either us or the owners to assess, okay, this is a high hazard dam. How many homes do we think are at risk? And really at that point, it was just people standing on the dam and looking at what is immediately downstream. We're trying to figure it out from an overhead older topography map and trying to figure out that element. We have a lot better tools since 2017, or since 2015, especially with all the failures that we had up in Columbia, to actually accurately assess what is at risk if a dam fails. And we encourage alternate templates. We want the best emergency response. We see our template as a starting point. It is not meant to be the end for the planning process. We provide assistance to dam owners in putting their EAPs together. Beginning in 2018, we will provide dam owners with a partially completed EAP on that standard template, again, just a starting point, and then beginning a process of reviewing, revising it, and then those dam owners can return it to us for final approval. When we put together a template, and I'll show you some examples in the next few slides, but we provide basic information on the dam from our database. So that's height and impoundment volumes. That's identifiers, state and federal identifiers. We recently updated to unify those because it's been too complicated keeping track of many different numbers. We provide, again, starting points, and this is from FEMA, a sort of way of triaging dam issues. I see that there's some erosion here, but do I need to be calling 911 immediately, or do I need to be calling Danny and seeing, hey, is this a problem? How long would it take to develop? We provide a starting point inundation map on the DSS-wise light model. Going to get into a lot of detail about that later on. From that map, we provide lists of downstream road and habitable structure hazards. Those are not lists of all the hazards that may be in that inundation boundary, mostly because we just don't have that data. So there could be key infrastructure elements, there could be evacuation elements, there could be just things outside of the scope of what we look at classification, but that are real actual impacts if that dam were to fail. So again, we see this as a starting point. We'll provide property ownership information for the downstream sites that we identify as being at risk, pulled from county property records if available. We cannot provide contact information because we don't have that, but we can provide, this is who the county has as owning this house, and this is the location that's impacted. And we can provide a default sort of notification tree with standardized preferred county emergency management numbers to those owners, and then those can be built upon. So that's where those trees, we'll look at some examples of that in a minute, can be built upon to even internal to, say, an HOA. This is the person or people whose job it is to keep an eye on the dam and report issues of it. They escalated, there's this person that said, yep, we need to pull the trigger on getting an alert out, and now call 911. They can go in any direction with that. That could be if there's a HOA and a property management company. You mentioned we have some of those on the call. That could be factored in. Or, and this is why, again, we really appreciate working with counties on these topics. We will represent counties emergency management as one box. But if that's something that needs to be broken down per county as to it's this desk and then this group is looped in and so on from there, it can be built out as needed. And then we will work with dam owners on tabletops of the APs. So that's getting everyone in the room together, just running through what are our steps, what can be improved, what's outdated. He doesn't live here anymore. We need to get a new person listed as the main contact, and even full exercises if needed. This is our template. This is what we pre-populate and provide to dam owners. A lot of this is based on the FEMA template and Natural Resource Conservation Service template. But talking about some of that information that gets populated, you can see the height, the impoundment, what region, how often it's inspected. And then sort of an at-a-glance summary there of potential downstream impacts. Yeah. In our template that we provide, we'll start with what our inundation model shows, and then that can be built upon however the owner wants. If they want to include other things they know are at risk, there's some other pages not here. This is not all of our EAP template by any means. They can make it as site-specific as possible. If we want this to be usable and clear for anyone reading it, what is at risk at a glance and who needs to be notified. We provide a starting point from FEMA of potential dam deficiencies and really which sort of pathway should you follow if you identify that. If you see a little, like, for example, I don't know if you can see quite on here, but new seepage area near the dam, that may be non-failure. Hey, nothing to go head for the hills immediately on. But if it's seeping and there's discharge over some predefined amount per minute, or you're seeing sediment being transported, maybe consider escalating. But dam owners can make this site specific. Some of these are not going to apply to certain sites. As I said, not every site is the same. And some dam owners will include different tiers. Well, we'll have some of our larger operations also include a high flow condition. So nothing to do with the dam itself. It's just a lot of rain's coming through, water levels above normal, expected to drop down. But while it's at that high flow situation, they'll add a fourth call tree for just making sure everyone's in the loop of, hey, let's be aware. Nothing to react to at any point, but just follow up on what's going on. And then we will provide, here's an example of our imminent failure. So on the right here, call tree. And that's where I mentioned, I said, we always say, if you have any doubt of what's going on, or if you're reporting an issue, call 911 first. That, will route you to where you need to be. You'll probably end up at some of the same boxes immediately after this, but when in doubt, call 911. If you don't have your EAP on you, don't go looking for it. If there's an emergency happening, if digging through stuff, then it's an emergency, call 911. We will provide, though, a county emergency management division number. You'll see it's not populated here, but that'll be for whichever county. We've gone through CAT. It's done a great job coordinating with the counties on getting those numbers confirmed, and also with sharing access to EAPs. And then, this gives starting point, a couple DHEC number that we'll provide. This is for our 24-hour number for DHEC, we'll have it, DES in general. But we also have a more specific 24-hour dams number I'll show you at the end of this presentation. Potential inundated property list, we will, as a starting point, provide a list of identified structures from the county records, county GIS records, or property records. But EAPs don't have to have this. They don't have to look like this. This is our starting point. But if you have a plan where you coordinate with a county and you could work on some sort of automated part, or say an HOA invests in a system that does that itself, maybe if the impacts are only local within the neighborhood. Or if it's a dam owner and the failure only impacts one neighboring neighborhood that has an HOA and they've got a way of notification. There's a lot of different ways to approach this. So just because we provide a template that has these filled in, does not mean that we need to see all those blanks filled in immediately. Yes, if nothing else changes, we'll need to see phone numbers or at least some strategy for contacting those sites just to check that regulatory advice. But we absolutely acknowledge that for many dams with major impacts, this is not the most feasible or really at all feasible way to execute an actual emergency response. This is an example of the inundation maps that we will include in an EAP. These are maps that are also that we will provide to county emergency management as needed. I'll get into details of what these maps describe and how they were set up in a minute, but these are also not necessarily something that need to be locked into an EAP. We provided a starting point, but dam owners are welcome to. If they bring in outside engineering firms, if they have more sophisticated innovation modeling, more site-specific modeling, they want to model multiple scenarios. We provide one scenario. If they want to look at it in different conditions, there's no limits to what can be in an EAP. It's kind of a blown-up image of what we showed. This was just the index page of it, but our starting point once we'll identify habitable structures. You'll see the little triangles up at the top there, and you can also see flood depth to a degree. In here, we also have a web application that you can get into a lot more detail as to the numbers and all, how specifically how deep is a given point in a given house. For EAP, we really look at it as an in-hour app statement. Now, there are a lot of tricky issues that do come up with EAPs and work with owners on developing it. One is when there's multiple parties involved. It said you can have more than one owner. You can have one owner, but they don't live at the site. So who's going to notice if it's sprung a leak and that's developing over a month or so? What do we do there? Can we approve an EAP if someone says, we know that they live halfway around the world? Oh, yeah, like I'll just be the first one to make that call. Do they have an operator? So does that operator have a role and are they written into the EAP? And again, operator, that can be someone formally hired to do that role. That can be someone designated within an HOA to do that role, or within a family that's ownership. That could be the dam owner themselves. There's no requirement licensing to be a dam operator. What we would want is if your EAP says, hey, my operator will be the one detecting if there's issues and making that first notification. We want to see in the plan, okay, who is that? What's their name? What's their phone number? And are they aware? Are they signed off on the plan? Are they comfortable with accepting it? You can have varying degrees of impact for a dam failure. Dams can fail and impact sites across county lines. That complicates. You have 3 homes impacted in this one county, and then 1 road, 1 county over. So we account for that in our templates that we provide. We'll provide another number for that, or however many other counties are involved, with known impacts, not just if it flows into a river and goes past 6 counties. We'll put 6 numbers on there. We are looking at actual, like, where there's some response potentially needed. If there are dozens or hundreds of structures impacted, that makes it really hard for the phone numbers. That makes it really hard for the notifications. Very much outside of dam owners' real capacity to do that. Critical facilities, we don't necessarily have that. We don't know that if this one substation gets flooded, that takes out a whole chunk of the grid. One, because it's sort of outside our regulatory scope, and we just don't have the data to pull in on that. So that's something we encourage dam owners to think about. Is just because we say these are the list of hazards, that's not the end of it necessarily. We don't look at economic impact. We don't have that data, and it's outside of regulatory capacity too. So it may be that we say there's little to no impact. It floods your neighbor's land, but that's $1 million worth of cropland. And so maybe that's someone that you would want to throw in as a notification. Dam owners can add notifications as needed as well. Identify dam issues, mentioned how the dam owners can take that in any direction they want, divide things up the way they want. It's hard to get notification data, keeping that current as well. Just people move in and out downstream. And it's sort of vague under the regs and statute that dam owners are required to keep their EAPs current as to what that means. But we acknowledge it's very difficult to keep track of if there's 100 homes below you, who's living in one any given week or month. And so above all, we want to maintain effective communication between all the parties involved and assist where we can with the downstream information. The inundation mapping that we run our models off of is something called DSS-WISE Lite. It was developed through the University of Mississippi through FEMA funding. The reason we use the advantage of this model is it's easy for us to set up using known data. We have the input data, the height and the volume of impoundment for our dams. And then really that and a few other basic elements are all you need to run it. You don't need an incredibly detailed model of everything downstream, every culvert. It can account for, as you can see here, we can put bridges into it, we can put in culverts, we can, to a limited degree, can handle that flow down the channel. So it's not the end all be all of mapping either, but it has been very beneficial for us for our reclassifications, our hazard assessments, as well as for our EAPs. It's a very conservative model as well. It's not the most conservative model. It can account for everything. But it's a very conservative model. We're erring on the side of caution with our plans. And we run a sunny day model, but at max capacity. So we're not running under hurricane conditions. We're not accounting for a certain level of rainfall. But what we're saying is on a sunny day, but the dam is at full capacity, then the entire dam failed. The reason we run that scenario is one, there's some regulatory elements that's laid out. That's how we do our hazard assessment, but also because that's the surprise. We'll look at our alert systems at the end of this presentation, but hurricanes we can at least see coming for a number of days, even large rainfall events. But this is meant to be one where everyone thinks everything is fine. There's an issue with the dam no one knew about. It's as full as it could possibly be, and then it all fails at once, and we have no time to respond. So there are additional modules within DSS-WISE that you can look at for hazard analysis. We don't fully implement those yet. The points I was showing you earlier, the houses, that is not coming straight from the model. That is an individual assessment that our staff do here, along with the roads. But we can run other scenarios as needed. So just because this is our standard approach, if a hurricane is coming and we know right now, hey, this dam has an issue, but this is where the water level's at. If it failed tomorrow, what would that look like? We can run those models. In the setup, we can define the dam, we can build in bridges below it. All we have to do is input height data, impoundment data. The terrain model, is something that is built into the system. It's relatively recent, especially for South Carolina terrain data. So yeah, it doesn't mention the development earlier. It can't account for it if someone went in and regraded the land, built new development in floodplain or changed the path of a road, in the last year or two. It can't account for that. It's not perfect. But it absolutely has helped us in assessing hazard classification, putting plans together, way beyond what we had before. Just comparing, low hazard dam generally is one that even if it affects a large amount of area, we're not seeing any structures impacted, any roads impacted, regardless of what the depth is. Whereas a high hazard dam is one where you're going to see a lot of impact to, and one structure is all it takes to make something a high hazard dam. Mentioned earlier. But we can assess not just, okay, how many structures, but how fast is that water going to be flowing through? You know, how deep is it going to be? Yes, it may be within the inundation boundary, but maybe it's only 1/10 of an inch versus, okay, it's coming through at a few feet per second and it could really cause a major hazard for anyone who's in that site. So I mentioned sunny days, limitations, we can't account for additional rainfall. It can be at any starting water level as we need it, but we use top of dam flood events. We also do some earthquake modeling, some seismic modeling too as needed, but those are not in the maps that we provide for EAP. It can't simulate multiple dam failures, so not as much of an issue for the dams in Berkeley County. Back in Columbia, that we had in 2015, that was exactly what happened. Failure in series, we can't simulate for that yet. They are working on that. That grid cell size, what that just means is that it's not picking up any feature that's smaller than 10 feet. So, if there's culverts, it can't pick up any culverts less than 20 feet wide. So it may be showing a road impact, but in reality it wouldn't, but we're erring on the side of caution. But they do have our updated LiDAR for the terrain model. And then there are full results that we can provide to anyone on request. That's the dam owner, that's your emergency management. What you see in sort of the deliverable there, the visual earlier on with the mapping, is only a small portion of the actual information that we get from the output in the model. We have an application where we put these models online. You can see the boundaries. And we can look at this later on too. If you want to take some time to end, we can do a full demo of it if you like, or we'll absolutely make sure you all have access to this link. This is all public information. And you can go and you can see where our dams are, what they're currently classified. You can see what our boundary is for that DSS-wide model. And you can also see what the depth is for that. So it's maybe a little hard to see on the screen, but there is a layer that you can turn on that will show you a few different values. And that will tell you at that one particular point that you clicked, how deep is the water? What is the deepest that water ever gets in that model? What time does it arrive? So do you have an hour to work with? Do you have a minute to work with at that point? And then also just what the reference elevation that we're using in this, just in case there have been changes to that, or changes in the area below it in the terrain. We also assist dam owners in emergency situations with a limited targeted notifications and alerts. So we have adverse weather procedures that we follow. We didn't have to do a full activation, thankfully, with the recent hurricane off the coast, but it was definitely something we were keeping an eye on. We will send out alerts if it is believed that it's not just hurricanes, any major storm event. We had one in the upstate last month. Just that I'll show you in the next slide where those thresholds are, but if a certain amount of rainfall is predicted, we'll send out an alert to dam owners or to targeted groups of dam owners, whether it's the hazard classification, whether it's the condition that dam is in. We can customize these however needed. And we will send out these alerts to instruct or inform, hey, a lot of rainfall is coming, maybe consider lowering your water. We do not issue orders specifically to evacuate. We cannot issue notifications on behalf of a dam owner to people downstream. We're more of an advisory role. Before a storm, we will have staff, if time permits, go out to do a quick assessment of dams. We also, as of last year, implemented a self-assessment through the Ready App system tool. So where dam owners can receive a notice saying, hey, really appreciate if you have some time. You just fill in a few fields, take a picture of your lake, and just let us know that it looks good. That saves us time on our inspections. We can target the ones that need the most attention. We're not going out to ones that are actually fine to condition, or if someone's out there and observing a problem, we can go ahead and get a response going before having to get someone out there. Especially if we have, I mentioned, we have 16 staff members across the state, but and we can call upon others in a hurricane from SCDES, but major impact, even something like Helene last year, that number can be very low very quickly. Post-storm, we will also assess dams and send out notices to radio out, hey, just be aware someone may be coming out to your site, or you can do a self-assessment and let us know that they weathered the storm just fine. We have a protocol that we follow. We're looking at National Weather Service data, and this is how we use sort of triage. Okay, this area, we don't even look at the county level necessarily. It can be parts of a county, or it can be multiple counties along a certain curve in the National Weather Service map. Well, this is the range that's going to get over predicted 6 inches of rainfall. They're going to get a certain type. After the storm, this area got 4 or 5 inches of rainfall, or I stayed up to 7, which would be a much wider response. And so just because you got notice before a storm doesn't mean that you necessarily get one after the storm or vice versa. We use this to communicate with dam owners, send out the general information. We can request lowering and monitoring of water level. We will pass on instructions that we get from the governor's office as well from that, especially during hurricanes. We will pass along advice to check your spillways for are they clogged? Would they flow if needed if the water really starts coming up? To review their EAPs or to let us know if they can't find their EAPs and need a copy sent to them again, and we keep everything on file once it's approved. I've mentioned those assessments and the self-reporting. Again, we don't use this to issue orders, like you don't to evacuation orders or response orders. That's outside of our jurisdiction. We coordinate with emergency services on dams that we have gotten reports. Hey, this one may be in high risk of failing, but then that's not something that we would send out, flip the switch, even if we have a list already on hand of affected structures to get a notification. And wrapping up here at all times, we are available at this number, 803-898-1939. This number rotates through our staff member. This is our, not for direct emergency reporting. If your dam is failing, call 911 first. This is a technical assistance line. And you know, that can be everything from, hey, I think there's a problem with this, you know, do I need to get someone out here to look at it, to a report during an incident. Hey, I just called 911. I'm just letting you know that there's a problem with my dam. Someone's always monitoring that. And then our regional offices provide technical assistance as well as dam owners. We also have on our website a lot of resources for dam owners. We can look at later if we have some time. If not, just go to SCDES/dams and you know, you'll see a dam owner resources page. And that is the page. Sure. You have a new shortened link. We'll make sure you get it. But there'll be a lot of resources available for dam owners. A lot of other things outside the scope of what we're covering today that we can provide to dam owners too. So with that, I'll start 11. And if there's anything that county wanted to jump in on the notifications, or we can take some questions too. That was a lot of information at once. Thank you. I appreciate the time.
Yeah, what questions do y'all have before we start, or other staff from DES that want to speak on anything?
We used to send a notice to tell us when to open the valve in the dam, and now I don't seem to get those anymore. I just get you may need. So I guess the big question is, we have a big issue in our community about, well, who opens that? Because if we open it, we lower the lake level, and we don't get the amount of rain we're going to get. The homes that are against that lake are going to have a considerable amount of yuck exposed, and then who knows how long it'll take to fill it in. So who decides when to open the valve and when and how early and all that?
That is not part of our authority or responsibility as the Department of Environmental Services to dictate how people manage their water levels. That is not what we do. We do make sure people are maintaining their dams, making sure that you don't have like a buildup of debris, so your spillway is totally clogged. But things like, when do you lower it in advance of a storm? I mean, that is not anything we will ever, order people or direct people to do. It really comes down to the dam owner. It's the dam owner's discretion. And it's about risk too. Risk, how much risk are you willing to accept? You say, yeah, you may lower it and you don't get as much water as you thought, or rain as you thought you would. And now you gotta, maybe it's unsightly, but also, you also minimize the risk of a potential issue with the dam. So, Personally, I would always want to err, to be as, minimize risk as much as possible. But it also can be a technical question. You know, there's, you know, how much flow can that spillway handle? You know, how much time do you need to drop the lake a certain amount? And that's where a professional engineer, and the advice of a professional engineer would be, advisable. But, you know, unfortunately, we have too many dams, first off, to try to say, you know, direct each one as far as what they need to be doing. We just have too many. So and also, you know, if you're lowering the water level, you need to have eyes there on the dam to be able to make adjustments, you know, to when do you need to stop? Are you flooding people downstream? You know, so it's too much for us to try to manage with all the dams we regulate.
Yeah.
I mean,
We're low hazard anyway.
if you're low hazard, then yeah, you have, you know, there's little risk to begin with.
Yeah, I mean, you know, our sluice gate is 18 inches. I mean, it would take
Yeah.
days to make a difference in a 72 acre
So for
lake.
y'all, the risk is maybe, you know, you just don't want to if you lose your dam, then it's gonna be expensive to repair it, but also, you know, it's gonna be even more unsightly if you lose the dam. So, but at least you don't have to worry about, you know, people downstream.
And on this notification specifically too, the language you're talking about changing over the years, we do pass on, so we have I mentioned our triage approach and our advisories that we'll we'll put out. We also will pass on, say, the governor's office, issues, and just a declaration and distribute it to dam owners. So that is where the language, I could see maybe in the past, having been a little bit different. SCDS cannot issue those orders, and John was saying, but
Even that time, that one time, there was a governor, executive order by Governor McMaster that said all dam owners should consider lowering water levels if it's safe to do so. I mean, even then, it wasn't an order to immediately go lower water levels. It will always be the dam owner's kind of discretion and you know, and liability will be with the dam owner.
in terms of receiving the alerts as well, that hazard classification is a huge factor. Submission of targeted alerts by how much rainfall and what condition the dam's in. Hazard classification is a big part of that. So low hazard dam is on the whole going to get fewer of those alerts than a hazard dam would in the same area.
Cool. Any other questions for DES? Anyone on the virtual side?
I'm good. Thank you, though. That was very helpful.
Let's do a quick 5-minute break. We'll say 11 o'clock. We'll get back started. Please, coffee, donuts, fridge full of drinks, and we'll get started with the county side, and then we will call it a morning.
Hi, everyone, got 11 o'clock, we'll go ahead and get back started. So thank you to DES for doing the presentation, definitely a lot of information. So even after my part, if there's questions that come up, I mean, definitely please ask them, especially on the virtual side as well. So from the emergency management department, just a little bit about kind of what we're doing, what's going on, just little concepts for you to be aware of. Of course, during a lot of our storm events, we're in a good bit of conversation with DES, especially during Debbie, we were talking almost daily. And you know, Debbie, we were able to mitigate any issues and work through a lot of the process. But you know, what's the next storm that comes along, or what's the next incident? We saw that last weekend, just in the Fox Bank area, Fox Bank was completely underwater. You know, what does that impact look like in the rest of the county when we're getting 5-6 inches in a couple hours, or it's 10 inches in a couple hours? So we're going to add a little scenario just for conversation, just things to be thinking about. But let's talk about what we're doing. So our agency is the primary agency for disasters and emergencies within Berkeley County for the government. All the resource ordering in the county comes through this room. So we look at things like swift water response team. We look at sandbags. Sandbags is always the big thing that a lot of folks actually really ask for. That's a lot more calls to sandbag requests. A lot of that is organized and coordinated actually through this emergency operations center. And we activate to various disasters or emergencies to make sure that that support's ongoing. And our activation is based off of 3 tiers. So it's called operating conditions. OPCOM 3, OPCOM 2, OPCOM 1. OPCOM 3 is what we live at. It's normal day to day. there's no big issues. Opcom 2 is like, hey, something maybe is happening. Opcom 1 is like, it's here, it's happening. You know, we're kind of in like full response mode, full activation, and that's what we're looking at. Now for us, if there was some kind of failure, that could potentially put us to Opcom 1, depending on what the hazard is, or maybe 2, depending on what the hazard is. And that's something as we go through, we kind of assess, hey, what's the hazard? Where's the location? Where's the failure? So county notifications. We have 2 systems that we can actually use for county notifications. So we have Rave. We always say we want as many folks to sign up for Rave as we can. So Rave is a subscription-based mass notification system. So it is pretty much just subscription-based. Our Hurricane Guide actually has this. It's online, but it is for public safety messages. The other thing that we have is something called iPause, which is the Integrated Public Alert Warning System. This is where we actually can do direct wireless emergency alerts, or we can look at the emergency alert system. So if something happens at one of your dams and we get that notification, hey, you just had an imminent failure, we've got an imminent failure, we have to look at some kind of a downrange protection, iPause is the thing that's not subscription based, that's based off an area. So we can actually highlight an area and kick a message out. So if you've got 100 homes, and I'm just being hypothetical, that have potential impacts, we can highlight that area and say, if you're in this area, you need to leave. Or if you're in this area, stay in your house. Or if you're in this, whatever that message that we work on this. But that's something that we've used. So everybody remembers during Debbie, Cane Bay. Cane Bay was pretty much, Cane Bay's a bowl, right? Everybody, if you've been to the Cane Bay area, it's a bowl. Cane Bay was flooded during Debbie. The message was, for right now, stay in your home. And we sent that to the whole entire community of Cane Bay, just to tell them to stay in their home. For Debbie, also French Quarter Creek was one that was sent out. You'll see that the Weather Service has actually started sending these out as well. So the Weather Service, for some of their flood warnings that they do, they actually may send out messages as well directly to your cell phone. So you don't see that it's from Berkeley, from the Weather Service, or who it may be from. It's all a FEMA system that we're able to tap into. So that's something to keep in mind with. Other things, just our outreach for social media is always a good thing. Berkeley County Government, Berkeley County Sheriff's Office, and those are good things to look at. Just general media releases, and then we set up what's called a joint information system and a joint information center. So we actually coordinate a lot of messaging between the municipalities as well as with the states, with the school district. So for example, the big thing on Berkeley County Growth and Development is when you're going to hear Katie Tanner's voice. Generally, we have some good conversation with Katie before we know that message is actually going to go out, especially on the school district side. RPOs are Jenna and Taylor. Those are the 2 that run our public information side. And there's a lot of that kind of coordinated messaging of what's going on. So when we talk about evacuation, one thing to think about is sheltering and mass care. That's one big thing that I want to make sure y'all are aware of is we have shelters all throughout the county. Generally schools, churches, and other facilities. And if we have something that prompts the shelter, that's partnership with DSS, the Red Cross, and other agencies. That may be the Department of Public Health or the medical emergency power shelters or medical care shelters, or it may be other entities that we can actually partner with to make sure that we've got shelters that have been open. Of course, we always say shelters are the last resort. And we never want people to go stay in a shelter because sometimes it's just a cot and what equates to prison food. And we don't want you to just eat bologna sandwiches and that kind of thing. But sometimes at a shelter, it's what can actually get there. So if there's something that can come out of this is when you look at emergency preparedness, that starts at the lowest level. You know, the residents that are in your neighborhoods, the residents that are in your HOAs, what is their plan if they had to evacuate? You know, it's something to kind of think about. And we're here to support that. But do they have somewhere else they can stay? Do they have another family member they can go to? Do they have a hotel they're going to go to? Or are they dependent on a shelter? That's understandable that some people are dependent on a shelter. During previous storms, we've built shelters up. Lawrence and Dorian, we had about, 550 to 600 people in shelters. During Debbie, it was probably at max 50, just from the rescue that were done. So it's very incident dependent. So evacuation, how does evacuation work? When we look at evacuation, there's kind of two sides to it. There's the hurricane-based evacuation zones that I want to make sure everybody's aware of because these have changed. And if you don't have a copy of our hurricane guide, you're more than welcome to on the way out. And then we have general incident evacuation. So if there's something that happens where it's a fire or a chemical spill, or it's an isolated failure, then we can send that message out of saying, hey, if you're in this area, leave. We try to be short and sweet. Sometimes it's get out, evacuate. You know, we know that sometimes that if we put too much, people don't really read that. Maybe it gets confusing, but that's something that we do. So for the hurricane zones, and these changed a couple of years ago, but we have zones B, D, E, and F in the county. So something to keep in mind is you may be in a zone that's impacted, or you may have a dam that's impacted in this zone. So zone B is Daniel Island and the Wando area. Zone D is the area immediately along the Cooper, pretty much. Zone E is Goose Creek, Fuji, Kinghorn, and then F is along the Santee River. So these are based off of surge models. So how much water could we expect during some kind of event? So anything that's ABC is coastal. Anything DEF is considered riverine or from a river. So this is something to be mindful of and kind of consider. Does your dam actually belong in one of these zones? So just for general planning from your side, and this is something we can definitely help you out with as well, but we'll see that not every dam lives in a zone. Some of them may, some of them may not. But when we're going through the evacuation process, we're having these discussions, we make recommendations based off of what is the surge we're potentially looking at. So hurricane evacuation is based off of storm surge, which is water. 50% of the deaths from tropical cyclones are always related to water. It's just always the case. So the idea is run from the water, hide from the wind. So we evacuate for any kind of surge that we're expecting. But at the end of the day, this is actually done by executive order from the governor's office. The executive order by the governor's office. So you'll see the masters get on TV and do the evacuation order. We generally have not had to do this. I think the last time we did this was 2019 in Dorian. But something else to think about is be mindful of your routes. What are your routes for actual evacuation? You know, a lot of folks, we depend on Google and Waze and all those things, right? What's the quickest way to get it out? If you have a couple phones, some people will look at Google Maps, some people look at iPhone Maps, which one tells you how to get out faster. But what we tell folks is that use the route that is closest to you, that's assigned to you. So certain communities have certain routes to take to actually get out of the county. Now, of course, evacuation is definitely a decision in and of yourself. Law enforcement is not going to come to your house and pull you out of your house, make you leave. And it is pretty much we order an evacuation, and when we do evacuation, we order those. So understanding that emergency services may not be able to actually reach you in the event something happens. So if you, let's say you live right close to D and we evacuate D, the surge from the Cooper could put you underwater. We may not be able to reach you for some time. That's kind of the thing with evacuations. We have moved to a more risk-based model with evacuations, but it's still the citizen's decision. We're always going to push that. Hey, if there's an evacuation order, I want you to leave, I want you to get out. And sometimes that may be that you just leave the area. You notice that a lot of the Nexon community, for example, is not in an evacuation area. You notice that some of Moncks Corner is not an evacuation area. On a beach, St. Stephen. So there's parts of the county based off this surge modeling that are not actually in evacuation areas. But again, this is a plan that at the individual level, we have to think about. So questions, comments, concerns before we do a little scenario? Not yet. And please take a hurricane guide. It's a good resource, not just for, of course, hurricane season, which runs from June 1st to the end of November. We're getting into the peak of the season, which means that the Atlantic and the Gulf are going to get really, really busy. But there's always the potential.
Can we get a bunch of these to take our airspace?
Absolutely, we can give you a handful of them. Yes, if y'all want a bunch of them, we'll happily give you a bunch.
4,000 properties, so.
We will.
I would love to give our homeowners.
Yes. definitely, and they're online as well. We can definitely send that to you
Okay.
online. You know, some people live with that, some people are okay with that, but whatever works. All right, scenario, just a quick little scenario. We'll have some good conversation and then we'll do a Q&A and then we'll call it a day. Scenarios based on real events. Of course, everybody was here during Tropical Storm Debbie. It was a really fun time. But we're gonna do a fictional dam name. This is being used just to talk through with owners, things that I want y'all to think about. So think about your own community. Think about what's going on in your area and what would you need to do? And talk to DES. Hey, what questions would you have for them? If this happens, what questions would you have for DES? What questions would you have for emergency management? Folks on the virtual side, feel free to speak up as well. We'll watch the chat just if you have anything to add. So August 8th and 9th of last year, you know, this has already happened, so we can definitely talk about it. Tropical Storm Debbie has passed through much of South Carolina, but around 10 p.m. on the 8th, substantial rainfall begins. As of 6 a.m. the next morning, the area around Moncks Corner received between 12 and 14 inches of rain. Cane Bay is completely flooded with over 100 road closures in the county. 40 swiftwater rescues have occurred throughout Berkeley. A citizen calls 911 reporting excessive flooding around the Renshaw-Shirley Dam in the center of Moncks Corner. The dam protects 100 homes and residents in the area. So again, fictional dam, but the rest of this actually is what we dealt with actually August 8th into the 9th. So this was Debbie, if you don't remember. So as of right now, this is what we're kind of dealing with, or even before Debbie even came close to the state. What are your preparedness efforts? What states or what steps are you taking rather? And then what's your current plan? What does your plan say? What kind of things? You know, they definitely said, hey, if you can't find your plan, don't go to try to find it. They can send it, or just something to think about. So for the folks in the room on the virtual side, what's on your mind? What kind of things are you doing? There's no right or wrong answers. It's pretty much just a thought-provoking little scenario.
Hi, this is Julia Nobles. So I know we had a kind of a situation that similar. So first thing as the property manager is I contacted the board of directors since they were on site to see, you know, if they could see what flooding was happening to determine if the dam was in fact, you know, if there was an issue with the dam. So that was kind of our first step.
Yeah, so communication is definitely a really cool thing, right? Hey, we're starting to make people aware, board of directors, anyone else. Hey, we got something may be going on here. So very good point there. What else? What other things are kind of going through your mind? You had a really good question earlier about the bout. Hey, that's some consideration. Absolutely. What else? Whether virtual or in person.
We'll figure out if we have a plan.
Yeah, what's the plan? That's something to think about. Hey, what is our plan, right?
Yeah.
You know, and that may involve some conversation with DES. Hey, I don't know where this plan is. Can you send this to us? Or
Yeah, that's something to do. We'll do that today. Let's work on
Yeah,
that. Let's
we're working on that
before
today.
we leave.
yeah. But that's something, you know, hey, let's reference the plan, what kind of things we do. What else? What else is on your mind at this point? You know, we don't have a failure. We're kind of like, man, there's been a lot of water.
We notify our residents. We do an email blast to all our residents.
Email rep, okay.
And we give them all county, FEMA, whatever information. So if they should have any issues, they know who to contact.
Absolutely. Just kind of like, hey, here's an awareness. It's
Yeah, we
happening.
got the storm here or coming, you know, here's some information. That's why I asked about the hurricane guides, just because we try to make sure that the homeowners are aware.
Yeah.
Because there could be a lot of people that move down here from up north that have never dealt with hurricanes and they don't know what to even do.
Right. Absolutely.
So then they can refer to that as far as evacuation routes and all that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they came down here to get away from certain things, but they got hurricane. They thought they were getting away from the snow, but last year we kind of traded that. You know, we got snow, the upstate got a hurricane. Don't know how that happens, but it did, right? What else? What other things do we have? Virtual side, any of our partners on the virtual side, you're more than welcome to chime in. So we're talking to our board of directors. I think that was a good thing. We're putting the email blast out to our residents. Hey, what's our plan? What kind of things we need to think about? And those are big things. Yes, ma'am.
So, you know, I'm with a company, right? And so what information, I guess, that I need to provide to the workers coming to work at a different shift time, you know? And like I said, I don't know what the plan is.
Yeah, we're gonna fix that today. We're gonna fix that today, right? So yeah, what communication are we putting out to,
Our employees,
to the employees?
yeah, they might come like the other, well, no, that was in my neighborhood. The other day, I mean, it was so much rain and I'm like, wow, I didn't think.
Yeah.
That it would be this flooded. And I was, thinking, should I drive through that?
Yeah. Well, that's a big thing, from public messaging, say, hey, turn around, don't drown. But it's such a quick, easy statement, but it's, hey, we don't know if the road's washed out, we don't know how deep that water is. We'll try to get you rerouted where we can. That's a big thing we always put out. Even with the last rain, we saw there was road washed out at like the Wadmalaw area, which, that could have been us. We have an area, Haynesville Extension, everybody familiar with that is? There's an area of Haynesville Extension that floods pretty routinely. Anytime we get a good rain, and part of that road actually will wash out. And they've probably repaired it 10 times that I've been with the county.
I think I just wanted to point out that these are the kind of questions that, you don't want to be, with the eye of the hurricane, in the cone of the hurricane, answering these questions. So this is the kind of stuff to think, actually plan out in advance. The EAP document really doesn't talk about your preparedness, what to do in advance, but it can. That's something like, as Sam mentioned, it's your document. That could be something that you want to add to your emergency action plan, is what you do even before
Absolutely.
it becomes an emergency. And the other things are, having those steps, and maybe it's a checklist, maybe it's, having that in writing. It is very valuable, especially with, we know that with homeowners associations, you've got a special, it's a specific challenge because you have people change roles. Your board is constantly changing. The people that, people you worked with last year are probably going to be different this year. So having these kind of things in writing,
Absolutely.
so people can look to and not, so you're not reinventing the wheel every year. Would be very encouraged.
Yeah, and it helps with continuity to his point, because it's very valid, right? It helps with continuity, because if you're not here, let's say that you take a vacation, you're like, man, I'm on a cruise, that storm looks really bad, but I'm on a cruise, right? And you've got the plan that you can actually say, hey, here's this, here's the checklist, here's everything that the board of directors or whoever's kind of your alternate should be doing, right? So let's do a scenario update. So an additional 911 call occurs reporting a possible imminent failure of the dam. We don't really know if it's imminent, but the caller says that there is water coming out of this place like I've never seen before in my life. And the area around the dam seems really damaged. It seems like there's a lot of damage that we haven't seen, but I don't know. It's just that people have seen the Renshaw Shirley Dam not like this before. So what's next? What do you do? What does your plan say? What does coordination look like? If that's the information that you just got, maybe you found out about that, or somebody just called you. So what's next? Is it safe to potentially inspect that dam? Do we have other things that we can do? You made a good reference about cameras. We don't really have electronic water gauges for any private dams. Is there anyone in the state that actually?
Yeah. They are very helpful. I strongly recommend looking into them. We have, I can provide a reference for a water monitor that you can see exactly where your water level is from your phone if you want to know, is it coming up? Is it reaching it at the spillway? Is it going over the spillway?
And I bet those are super cost effective.
I mean, they're not that expensive. I mean, you could have that for under $2,000. You could have that there's an ongoing monthly service. But we are also working with Clemson to develop one that's even way cheaper than that. So hopefully that'll be something I can talk about in the future.
Yeah.
But right now, today, you can buy them off the shelf, the kind of things that would give you that ability to know exactly what's going on with your lake, your water level.
Yeah, that's something to think about. And it may be that you have to take this back to your property owner association, your HOA, and say, hey, this is something we should really think about, so we can see this. But what's next? What kind of things are you doing next as the owners, as the folks that live in this community? What are you doing next?
Following our EAP.
There you go. That's a really good idea. Hey, what does the plan say? So, we talked about email blasts, we talked about general messaging, that kind of thing. I'm gonna give you our duty officer number. I would definitely prefer that, of course, you call 911, but this is another number that you can use that you'll always get an EMD staff member. So I'll make sure that y'all have this at the end as well, with our last slide. But what else? What else is going through your mind? You potentially have places in your community that may be restricted by water. So if this happens, this dam actually fails, do you have areas of your community that may be potentially restricted? Do you have those potential folks with medical needs who may not be able to get out in your community? You know that Mrs. Smith, who lives on blah, blah, blah street, she is bedbound and she's got all this stuff. If something happens, she can't get out of her home. That kind of changes the game a little bit, right? When we start thinking about what that looks like, or how do we get in touch with them? Sometimes it may not be your whole entire community. It could be that there's certain parts that, hey, we come to this location, right? You come to the central office or whatever that may be for information. But what else? What else is on your mind? Even on the virtual side, you can definitely feel free to speak up as well.
I just wanted to say, I think what John was talking about with the camera, or the way for us to figure out what's going on. I know in our situation, it was 4 a.m. and even with a board member driving through the neighborhood, it was, they can't see anything to determine if the dam has failed. The only way we pretty much knew it probably wasn't was because a street wasn't flooded. That probably would be if it did fail. But it was very difficult for us to determine if it in fact failed or not.
Yeah, and that's a really good point, and what we never want is we never want folks to put their lives at risk to do that assessment. If you have communities where there's other things, cameras are great, water gauges are great. If you have folks in your community that can fly drones, provide that information back if they can safely do so. Again, safely do so. That's a big thing. During Debbie, just from what we were doing, of course, we were having conversation. I feel like almost daily we were talking to each other. I feel like I spoke with DES more than I spoke with anybody else there for a little bit. But we were actually having that conversation. That coordination is there from the Department of Environmental Services. So we want to make sure both entities are supporting you guys kind of in this. But it was, looking at damage, looking at, what does this look like? Making sure that we are assessing any kind of problem areas. Those are things that will be considered being discussed. And there's resources that we can bring down. If there is resources that you guys need, that's something that, if we're going to make sure you have our contact information, say, hey, we think this is going on. We need to look at this. During Debbie, some of our areas of concern, of course, we had so much water on 52 in Monk's Corner that we were thinking that we'd have issues at Moss Grove. It wasn't. We just had a lot of water that came with the storm that completely shut down 52 in that area. So those were a lot of considerations from our side. DES, anybody, what are y'all thinking at this point? Hey, there's potential failure. Y'all are doing messaging, but do y'all have anything else to add at this point either?
I'd say, we're looking also just any sort of technical pictures, videos, kind of where you're talking on the drones, because you speak to this too, but
Feed us as much information as you need.
If it's a report from someone just driving by, or a community member, or someone who's very versed in the dam, this could be different things. And we've had reports before of a spillway operating, maybe not when it's always operating, but operating as intended, but coming in as they call it, the dam's failing. I see all the water rushing through. That a local who owned it would be able to say, and it's all part of the communication part of it. No, that's fine. The water level's high. We're gonna keep an eye on it, but that's its design versus
this is how it's supposed to be.
I would second what Sam's just saying is, you don't want just rumors to dictate, I'm gonna call Will to order evacuations. You don't want to do that just based off of social media post or a text or something, you want someone that's familiar with the dam to confirm what's going on before, you start alerting the entire world. I mean, we get that a lot. There's a lot of misinformation that especially during a big hurricane event or something. There's a lot of, chatter, a lot of people are, people want to, sometimes people want to see, that people love, disaster. And so you gotta cut through and make sure you know what exactly is going on.
Yeah, and there's a lot of rumor control, and that's where the public information officers really come in. But, we have to kind of work through that. There's so many places you can go for information. We always say go to trusted sources. We know that people will drive down the road, take a picture of something, and it gets shared 100 times on Berkeley County Growth and Development. And those are things that we're watching from our side as well. Of, hey, we just saw this. Is there anything we can actually, this is action. We need to do anything. We want to make sure we go to the source.
So how do you coordinate with the neighboring counties?
So we talk to their directors, we'll talk with their 911 centers, a lot of communication. We'll talk to them by radio. So pretty much any communication method, we'll actually have conversation. We'll actually coordinate resources. So during Debbie, we brought in swiftwater teams from outside the region, because as our folks are working on general day-to-day response, we need that supplemental resource. And that's any county is going to have to bring in a lot more resources. But we had conversations between the three counties, Dorchester, Berkeley, and Charleston, really work well together. Hey, we're bringing this team in. I'm going to put them here. Does this benefit you? Is there another team that we need to bring in? So a lot of that conversation is going on pretty routinely. And sometimes if they're on our email updates or, if we've activated, they get a message just like our DOC staff. So for us, a good email address for us, but for any notifications, this is our duty officer line, 843-719-1051. This goes to someone automatically every single time. If it's something that is imminent, we always say call 911. That's always a big thing. Call 911. We are at a second call. But if you're like, hey, we just had a failure, something happened, please call 911. But this is another number for us as well. And please sign up for the rate notification system. That's something that we definitely want you to do. iPause, make sure that any wireless emergency alerts, you don't turn those off on your phones. There's a way to do that now. So that's something to be mindful of. But any other questions, comments, concerns? Anyone on the virtual side?
No, but thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for the attendees. Thank you to the Department of Environmental Services for coming down and putting the information. That was definitely very informative. If you didn't know a lot about their program, there's definitely a lot to learn. But we'd like to do this again. Somebody mentioned, like, where's everybody at? That's a really good question. We understand during the day, sometimes really tough. So, there's conversation. Maybe we do this in the later afternoon or the evening. But please give us some feedback. What kind of things can we do different? What kind of information could benefit you guys? The templates are super helpful, but, hopefully there's something that you got that you can take back to your area. But do you have anything else?
You do just outreach, like I said, we have a community with 4,000 properties. Whoever, if you want to have any comments to our clubhouse and meet with our homeowners.
Absolutely. We'll send you, if you can send us a message, I can send you a speaker silent, like a speaker form, like we'll come out and do anything. We'll give you a bunch of hurricane guides to take with you as well.
And another thing, we'd be happy to, if anytime, your board changes, we've got new people coming in, we'll come meet with them, give them a little orientation if that's something that would help. But that is, there are a lot of dams out there owned by homeowners associations.
Absolutely.
And again, it's a revolving door of people. So making sure they know what they're signing up, when they get board, an incoming board, making sure they know what they're going to be responsible for is important. Yeah, we actually several years ago we did a webinar about the specific challenges that HOAs face when they are responsible for dams, and that's available on our website as well. It's got good stuff about you know, like, you know, how you need budgeting, you know, for potential capital, repairs and things, you know, making sure you have a capital reserve fund. Talks about, talks about working with an engineer. There, we have a licensed engineer that participated, that talks about, you know, how what the engineer's role is to work with the HOA.
But wasn't that a 4-part thing? I think I put that.
It was a 4-part thing, but it was primarily the fourth one of the 4 is the most applicable, I think.
Well, I think if it's the one I took, and what was also informative for us, and this is the size we are, there was an HOA, I think it was in Columbia, that actually worked with the town to get a tax.
They,
bracket,
yeah, they.
you know, for them to
that's-
get the money that way to take care of their
They
damage.
did,
I thought it was
sure.
Very interesting.
And then also about like insurance, insurance for your dam. A lot of people, you know, a lot of dam, you know, the insurance companies look at it 2 ways. You've got, you know, potential liability from just people that are on the water or around the water, you know, drownings and, that's separate from the dam failing. And then you know, then what happens downstream. Most insurance policies don't, you know, are not gonna cover that. You know, it's, the insurance companies are more, when you get a liability policy, definitely need to look at it. It's probably just gonna be anything that happens around the water. Someone's in, you know, people on the water, in a boat or swimming. So that's, you know, that's another thing that the webinar talks about.
Anything else? Any other questions on that? We got some hurricane guys. If you want to take some, you're more than welcome to take some. You can send it to you electronically as well. Yes, y'all have anything? Thank y'all so much. Definitely a really good presentation, but please donuts, coffee, that kind of thing. Please reach out. Either of us can do anything for you, but y'all have a good rest of your day.
Thank you, appreciate your time.
Certainly. Yes.
I knew I had the setting set up there, but before I respond to this person.